Hey folks, and welcome back to COVID Chats. My guest today is Josh Micley. Josh is an old friend of mine from Camp Yavneh in Northwood, New Hampshire. He was actually my unit head during my last year there as a camper, and we forged a great relationship, one that lasts to this day, and will continue to last, of course. It was really a sensational episode. He is currently the assistant principal at John F. Kennedy High School in Chicago, Illinois. We discuss the educational elements of this crisis, how things have changed, and we discuss it from an administrative point of view as opposed to from a teacher's point of view, as I've talked about earlier on this episode with episode 2 with Ben Spanbach, and episode 4 with Josh Schaefer and Alex Gold. Now I have to give a shout out to Josh Schaefer for some of the questions that I asked Mr. Micley, because he helped me sort of craft an idea of what I wanted to ask. I had some questions of my own, but he certainly helped fill that out. So shout out to Josh. Thank you for that. This was really a great episode. We go in depth on the educational system and concerns about what the fall will look like, what it's been like for students, how it has been for Josh as a person as well, and as a father of a young child, and as someone who is thinking about camp and what it's going to look like this summer. Even though he's not there, we still care deeply about Camp Yavneh as people who spent a long time there. So I hope you enjoy the episode. I think it was really a great one, although I love all my episodes equally. So without further ado, here it is, episode 31 of COVID Chats. Hello, Mr. Micley, and welcome to episode 31 of COVID Chats.
Thank you, Ruben. Good to be here.
Great to be here with you as well. Pleasure to have you on. I've spoken to some teachers previously on the program, ones who were in Vietnam teaching. I spoke to somebody who was teaching as part of the Princeton in Asia program. I spoke to my friend who was a public school teacher in the Bronx, but I'm excited to talk to you as an administrator, as a principal, sort of higher up on the totem pole. I think different vantage point, more interesting questions in terms of organization and things like that. So, but before we jump into that, I always like to ask my guests just, how are you? How are you doing in all this?
Good to see you too, Ruben. It's been a while, but always good to see your friendly face. I'm doing well. Family's healthy, no complaints. My wife Alexa is also in education. She's a teacher, so we both fortunately still have our work. We have our health. Extended family's doing well too. So all things considered, pretty good.
That is great. Yeah, I mean, that's really all you can ask for, right? The health and the employment. Those are the two big ones from most of the people I talk to. That's kind of what everyone's mentioning, which I think is kind of hits it right on the nose, right? Those are some of the two most important things there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you didn't ask me, but I'm healthy too. Thanks, Josh.
Good to know.
So, I've talked to some teachers previously on the program, as I mentioned, and they've gone in detail on the many problems of shifting to online learning. But I'm curious, for you, how has it been as someone who's been facilitating this change from an administrative point of view?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, obviously everything kind of happened on a dime. We had to do a total switch from in-person learning and kind of the in-person structure and all the in-person teams that exist within the building. We had to immediately move that all to the remote space. It's pretty impressive, the kind of massive lift that our teachers shouldered in making that transition. It's been tough. It's been really challenging. The biggest challenge has been reaching students. A lot of our students are kind of just unplugged, disconnected, sliding off the grid a little bit. So that's been kind of like priority number one, just reaching out to families, to students, making sure that everyone is safe and well.
Sure.
Managing kind of like the community side of our work of being a food distribution site and taking care of people in our neighborhood, but also trying to continue with meaningful instruction in this remote context.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, there's a litany of challenges with going online. That's something that wasn't mentioned previously, of students going, off the grid or just not being present. Do you think that's because, maybe someone in light of the fact that they're home and it's not in person, they just say, forget about school? Or is it because maybe they don't have connected devices or there's internet issues or whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of the above. Just to provide a little additional context, I'm an assistant principal at a Chicago public high school, so what I'm sharing is specific to our context here in the city. But we've been distributing devices to our students. We're fortunate that kind of prior to the school closure period, we were already a one-to-one school where there were enough Chromebooks for every student in the building. Now, we kept those in-house. We didn't let students take those home. So it's been kind of a pretty large effort to, in a safe, socially distant way, distribute those Chromebooks. But anyone who hasn't had a device has been able to come to school and pick one up. Our technology coordinator has been leading that work.
Wow.
And additionally, the district has provided us with a select number of hotspot devices that we've prioritized delivering to our students in temporary living situations so that they can get connected via the Chromebooks. So connectivity isn't actually such a challenge for our school community. It's more so kind of how do we get students engaged now that we know that they have devices and are connected.
Wow. I mean, it's fantastic that you've been able to get students Chromebooks and, internet hotspots. I mean, that's certainly one of something that's, shown the, the inequities in some of the systems is that students don't have those devices, whereas, maybe private school students, that's just a given. I have a high-speed internet connection, come from a well-off family. So it's wonderful that you've been able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we are like a public neighborhood school here in Chicago with a pretty significant student population that receives free and reduced lunch, and we receive Title I funding for that. So I wouldn't describe our community as particularly privileged, but I think that the school district as a whole and also our school community, kind of how we were set up as already being a one-to-one school, put us in a position of strength to really make sure that students were connected. What I've been hearing from a lot of colleagues of mine who work in elementary schools that weren't necessarily set up in the same way with a one-to-one device model, that's been a far bigger challenge. And the district has been working as a whole to kind of prioritize new purchasing and delivery of those devices to schools. And I know they made significant headway kind of getting a device in every hand of every student in the district, but still there is a bit of a ways to go, particularly with the hotspot devices and making sure students who don't have internet access can have a Chromebook and kind of make meaningful use of it by getting connected.
Right. Chromebook's only so good as the internet that you have with it.
Yeah.
Right? I've only one friend of mine I know has had a Chromebook. What can you do on the Chromebook without the internet connection? Are there still some word processing things, or is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of them will have kind of pre-downloaded programs that exist on them, but there isn't much for kind of a hard drive, so not much can actually live on the Chromebook itself.
Right.
It's not too useful. I know that some people kind of maybe can get connected for a little bit of time using the data from their phone, or people get creative and drive to spaces in the city where they can access free Wi-Fi. I know a bunch of kind of corporate partners, Comcast and Xfinity, have made free Wi-Fi available on a temporary basis, but you still need to live somewhere that has Xfinity hotspots. So there still are barriers, but some of the barriers that normally would have existed have been kind of lowered, and there is definitely increased accessibility.
Yeah, that was actually something I saw online. I don't know if you saw this, but students without quality internet connection at home were going to the parking lots of their schools to access the Wi-Fi. That doesn't sound like it was an issue at your school, but were there colleagues of yours at other schools or other schools in Chicago that was happening?
I've been hearing likewise that happens. I've been coming into my building most days because we are a food distribution site,
Right.
and there is some coordination that needs to happen on that end. And I haven't noticed anyone hanging out in our parking lot. So I think we are relatively connected, particularly relative to some of our kind of peer schools in the city.
Right. So, as someone who's held both positions, teacher, now administrator, whose shoes would you rather be in right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think kind of speaking to my personal experience, when I made the transition from teaching to administration, a big concern of mine was losing the face time with students. Something that's so great about being a teacher is you spend all day with kids who are way more fun to work with most of the time than adults.
Yeah.
But I found that when I became an administrator last year, I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of time that I got to interact with students. But in this remote context, I kind of just like live behind my inbox now. I haven't had an opportunity really to join any of the Google Meet sessions going on between teachers and students. I obviously don't see anyone in the hallways. I don't get to kind of go and have lunch with students. So I certainly miss a lot of the FaceTime that I had, kind of like selfishly from my own personal needs perspective. But I know for our teachers, it's been a tremendous challenge to get students engaged, to get them to log into Google Meet sessions. There's been some ambiguity and changing guidance with regards to grading, which is, traditionally one of the more important levers that teachers push on to cultivate engagement. And so that's kind of created this environment where it's hard to get students to show up and then be engaged.
Yeah, that was a question, a friend of mine, when I asked him if he had any questions for someone in your position, he wanted to know, are teachers being pressured to just, sort of pass kids because there's no other real option? Or is there another option?
So the timeline here in Chicago is that initially when the initial 2-week school closure period was announced in March, is the guidance from the state was that nothing that happened during that 2-week period could harm a student's grade. It could only help bring them up. But as it became increasingly clear that this remote learning was going to be longer than just 2 weeks, we got some revised guidance at the end of last month indicating that it's more complicated than that. And teachers have been advised to follow this guidance that basically tries to make sure that we're not harming students' GPAs.
Right.
And so if they don't pass a course, they're not getting an F that's going to bring down their transcript GPA. But we are beginning to issue incompletes, and incompletes are going to be issued for students who just are totally kind of disconnected, unplugged, not engaged. The district's going to make sure that we're providing free access to credit recovery, remote learning opportunities over the summer, because we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to regain that credit and then get back on track for graduation. But we also wanted to make sure that students who are just kind of like totally unplugging and not doing the work aren't just being passed through, right, and given credit for something that they haven't really, demonstrated mastery of.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, that would be a shame, both in terms of the, what it means to have an education and have an A on your transcript, but also for the student's sake, right? Like, the grades only mean so much there. It's really a reflection of the learning that goes on there. So how many students, if you had to put a number on it, are just off the grid AWOL right now? Percentage wise, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good question. 1,500 students in our school, and probably in each grade, I'd say somewhere around 200 students have been kind of out of touch for consecutive weeks. The rest, the way we're tracking this is every week we are tracking whether students have had at least a single touch point with one of their teachers, whether that was an email exchange, logging onto Google Meet, submitting an assignment via our gradebook platform. And so I'd say kind of out of the 1,500 students, roughly 200 have for consecutive weeks now not been in touch in one form or another.
Okay, that's a chunk.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the first phase of the escalation process is teachers tracking this data. And then what we're doing as a school is we're mobilizing pre-existing teams that we have here in the school to reach out to these students. And then the students that we cannot reach via kind of the teams here in our school and the support staff we have, we then escalate to the district level. And the district is, prioritizing reaching out to students who we have particular concerns about. And in some extreme cases, doing home visits and things of that nature to, check up on a student's well-being and safety.
Right. Yeah. I mean, most of the time I would like to hope it's not just, students being negligent. It's something's gone on, their parent needs the connected device for their work and they can't get online or something else. I mean, of course, there will be students who, use this opportunity who didn't like school in the first place, but, I'd like to think, most people are trying to do the best they can.
Yeah, I mean, what we found in kind of the early data that we're seeing is that the students are excited to engage and interact with their teachers for the most part. If they're at home with not much going on,
Right.
1 week of that might be fun, maybe 2 weeks. But after that, they want to see their friends' faces. They want to
Right.
hear their teacher's voice. They want to be given, activities that keep them engaged. And so I think we're pleasantly surprised with the gradual increase in engagement that we're seeing since week one to now.
Yeah, that was something previously mentioned by the teacher who I've brought up, is that that's such a big part of school, is that social element, that social learning, being with your friends, being present. So even if it means going to class online, at least you see the familiar faces and it has some sense of normalcy, and you get some elements of that social learning and development. It's such a key developmental period for students, K through 12 and through college as well. But um, one of the facets of the current role that you mentioned to me has been coordinating food and device distribution for those who rely on it. Certainly there's been a scarcity of testing in this nation, but are there at least enough lunches, to go around? I mean, you mentioned there's enough internet connected devices, but yeah, how's the food been?
Our food service staff have been doing a tremendous job.
Hmm.
Chicago Public Schools initially had all schools open distributing food, and then since spring break, we consolidated to a select number of food distribution sites. Given the size of our school community, we are one of those sites that is continuing to deliver food. And effectively, the policy is anyone in Chicago, no questions asked, can walk up to any of these food distribution sites and basically take as many to-go meals as they like.
Wow.
On some days, our team, which is stationed out in front of the building, has been giving out roughly 2,000 to-go meals of breakfast and lunch to families kind of around the community that have been coming to pick up. So
Hmm.
we're grateful that we can provide that service. That
Yeah.
the Chicago Public Schools as a whole has kind of made it a priority to fund that, and that also we're able to kind of take care of our local community on that most basic level.
Yeah, that's tremendous. I mean, I'm sure the students are grateful for it. I mean, everyone needs sustenance. You need good food to be able to learn, obviously to survive, but especially, you have to have something in the tummy. Yeah, has the food changed at all? Is it the same quality of food? Is it better quality? Because I know there's a certain stigma when it comes to public school lunch. I know the public middle school that I went to didn't have the greatest food.
hmm Yeah, I mean, listen, it's not Trader Joe's chocolate covered bananas that I understand you picked up this morning, but it's pretty good actually. One
Yeah.
day it was like popcorn chicken they were giving out. Another day it was hamburgers. A lot of the food needs to be reheated when you get home,
Sure.
so we're kind of counting on most of our families to have microwaves to do so. But we have some cold food that we can give out for people that aren't able to do that. But
Hmm.
yeah, on the whole, people have just been tremendously appreciative, grateful, and kind of happy that we're able to consistently provide this service.
Yeah, I mean it's huge. It's a huge burden off of parents. They're busy. It's big for the kids. I mean, everybody needs to get out of the house too, even if they have to do it in a safe manner. That's actually something I'm curious about too. What's the mask and glove situation like in the school, and also when students come to pick up and in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously trying to do everything in as safe, socially distant, and hygienic a way as possible. Everyone in our food service staff has been given face coverings issued by the district and gloves to wear throughout the day. We have a system where the food's kind of like on a table and people come and grab it, and the food staff is standing 6 feet away. We did something similar when at the beginning we were delivering kind of tens of devices on a given day in terms of Chromebooks. We had tape on the ground and spaced out by 6 feet. This is one of the face coverings that the district provided to me as someone who's coming in every day and supporting that work. So I'd say on the whole, it's pretty good conditions. We have a school building that's designed for 1,600 people, and there's only like 10 of us in here on a given day. So it's not cramped like some of the grocery stores that
Yeah.
people are seeing.
Yeah.
So yeah, thankfully, there have been no, fingers crossed, don't want to jinx it. There have been no cases among the staff in our
Sure.
school community. And, we hope if we continue these best practices, we can do our best to make sure that continues.
And how about the students that you've seen when they either come to pick up, or maybe if you've been in contact with any of them, have they been able to have access to masks and gloves and whatnot?
Yeah, most of the families that are coming are wearing face coverings.
Great.
Here in Illinois, the governor recently issued an order, I think pretty similar to what was issued in New York, that if you can't maintain that 6 feet of social distance, you are required to wear a mask,
Right.
particularly if you're in an establishment. And so people kind of respect that the front entrance to our building is a space that should be treated like that. And if you're approaching a staff member here, to only approach if you're wearing the proper protection.
Right. So I saw another news story a couple of days ago that the California State University system is going to be partially online only. For some of the schools, it might be strictly online only in the fall. I know that you're not working at a college, at a university, but what's the current plan for the fall? Is there thoughts to be either partially or fully online?
Yeah. Unclear. We're awaiting guidance. What we do know is that summer school is going to be held virtually. So our building is not going to be opened to students and their families until at the earliest September. And it's kind of yet to be determined whether it'll be full remote, full in person, or some sort of hybrid model that I know districts around the country are kind of torn around with. I know that Chicago Public Schools, the senior leadership team, is working closely with a couple consulting firms on putting together a couple contingency plans. And we're kind of awaiting more information as we get closer to the start of the next school year.
So, online learning seems to be a trend. Of course, it was a trend that was happening before this broke out. And, there's a lot of pros and cons to it versus in person. But, could you see it really being past COVID, just being the future trend? Will we ever have the same kind of in-person learning again? Do you think? I know it's a perspective question, hard to say, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, it seems like the trend was mostly at the post-secondary level. And so it's hard for me to imagine a world where at the high school level, we don't kind of continue to place a premium on the value of in-person instruction and learning. Something that I've been hearing from a lot of my teachers at the school is that it's just really hard for them to kind of continue to maintain the same relational trust that they have with students and connections that they have with them, and kind of work the same magic that they usually are able to produce in the classroom of reaching out to a student who needs particular help, right? There's no way to kind of in a Google Meet identify like, hey, based on that student's body language, I can tell like maybe they need me to like move a little bit closer to them, maybe they need me to like pair them up with that person. Like a lot of the tricks that teachers use to support individual students can't really be applied in the same way in the remote context. So I can't imagine a world where we move to totally remote learning at the secondary level. Will we see maybe kind of more flipped classroom models and more hybrid models? Perhaps. I could see that becoming a reality.
What is the flipped classroom model?
Well, a flipped classroom would be where a teacher records themselves giving instruction, and kind of the students watch that on their own time at home. So at home, they're watching the direct instruction, and then in class, it's just kind of like a support session. I'm trying to think of in college there's an equivalent where like you meet with like your TA,
like a recitation.
Yeah, exactly.
I got you.
Yeah, so more of that kind of model.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. Certainly, it does seem there's been a lot of talk on the business level about all of this office space that people have, and just the cost of maintaining these buildings and paying for all the people who are inside it. And there seems to be a lot of thought about, Twitter announced that they're going to have all their employees, allow them to work from home indefinitely. So, of course, that would radically change the economy, radically change the city. I hope it doesn't come down to that on the education level because of all the important elements of being in person.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the big distinction is, we're more than just an office building. We're kind of like a
Right.
hub for the community where,
Yeah.
so much beyond just classroom instruction occurs, whether it's meals or athletics, arts, we're a voting site,
Right.
so many things happen in our school building. It's hard for me to kind of imagine a world where local governments, cities, and states say, you know what, maybe we can move this real estate, save some money, and have it all done virtually. Because I don't think virtually could ever be a full substitute for what we do.
Same. And I got a lot out of the in-person instruction K through 12, so I hope it does maintain. You mentioned also to me that one of your roles in this crisis has been planning alternative end-of-year celebrations.
Hmm.
And I think, not only is that something fun for students to look forward to and something that's coming up, but also, something that's really necessary for students so that they have a sense of completion and closure. So, what are some of the current ideas for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's been kind of like a huge thing weighing on everyone's mind, that we have this group of seniors that, I think like the whole country seems to be rallying around seniors, whether it's, Scott Van Pelt on ESPN or what's that guy's name from The Office?
John Krasinski?
Yeah, with the Some Good News, and he did
Yeah,
that virtual prom.
yeah,
We have, celebrities like Obama and Oprah that are going to participate in virtual graduations. I think everyone is really kind of rallying around this group of seniors who, have reached this incredible milestone in their education and their lives. And they're not going to be able to be celebrated the way that we anticipated. Tomorrow was supposed to be our senior prom.
wow,
That obviously is not happening, at least in the way that we planned for it to happen. We're hoping to hold a virtual gathering next Friday. But is that going to be the same for our seniors? Of course not. We're in the early stages of planning a virtual graduation. If you've seen on social media, what a lot of school districts have done, which is really cool, is they've done these kind of like drive-through type caravan celebrations where people come in their cars and they're celebrated by their teachers standing outside 6 feet apart, wearing PPE and done in a safe and hygienic way. Our district actually made the tough decision, which, perhaps as a large urban school district was the right decision, to not allow those types of celebrations. So we can't have any sort of in-person gathering,
mm,
even if it's done in vehicles, even if it's done in a socially distant way. So we're trying to get creative and consider how we can celebrate the seniors. We've been working closely with our seniors, with our students. Number one, they're better at technology than us, so they're going to be more creative.
right.
And number two, this is about them, so we want to make sure that they have a voice in this process. But details are yet to be determined.
Hmm.
We were actually just 2 days ago given the guidance from the district as to kind of what is and isn't allowed. So now that we have a framework, we're going to start building within that.
What was some of the reasoning given, by those governing bodies that aren't allowing the sort of drive-by celebrations of sorts? Is it fears that people won't be socially distant?
They actually didn't explicitly kind of outline
Mm.
the reasoning behind it. I can speculate a little bit. I think that probably is one of the concerns. If students who haven't seen each other for 8-10 weeks see each other,
Yeah,
they're going to be excited. They're
yeah,
going to hug. Do we want to put our staff in the position where they're expected to come and participate in an event, even if it's one that we bill as a socially distant event? I think there are a lot of considerations, and I think erring on the side of safety and health during this time is probably a good move.
yeah. Yeah, it probably is. I mean, I feel like those students too. I mean, if I saw a friend of mine now, I'd have a hard time not hugging them. You know,
Definitely.
I'm dying for some human affection here. So, one more question from my friend, the public school teacher in the Bronx. He wanted to know how much variability or flexibility is there with each school and teacher. Is it heavily state mandated, or are some schools able to take a different approach?
Flexibility for what?
Well, in terms of coordinating, yeah, this whole shift. I mean, is every school like yours in the sense that they're a hub for food distribution and a voting site and whatnot, or I mean, in terms of the public school system, is it all being treated as a monolith?
I think the approach the district has taken is kind of like giving us guidance, giving us a framework, and then within that framework, we have flexibility. It's this concept of kind of like bounded autonomy. That we have autonomy as an individual school, but there are certain boundaries that we need to stay within. So I think a fair amount of flexibility. It feels kind of similar to the normal context of working in a large urban district where there's guidance and there's a framework, but then each school is going to tailor that to the specific needs of that school community.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm glad that they do have that. I'm glad there is that process of, or that system of bonded autonomy, because not every rule of law works perfectly across the board, and different schools just need to adapt based on the student populations and the age of the students and whatnot. So rounding out here, are there any thoughts that have arisen about our country, the world, the state, the community since the beginning of the crisis? Doesn't have to be an educational thought, just in general.
Wow, that's a big question. In the rules at the beginning, you told me that you'd like me to ask you questions. So I'm just going to throw that question back at you to hear your answer first, and then maybe I'll chime in.
Beautiful. I like that. Put me on my toes. Yeah, I've thought a bit about it. I feel, something I wanted to do before this broke out. I was thinking of launching my own sort of event community space in the city. I feel like there's a bit of a dearth of online of real culture going on. New York used to be such a hub for great culture, whether it be artists in the West Village, or I mean, obviously we're not living in the 1960s anymore, but I don't know, it feels like a lot of the current American culture just exists online, and in person is just so difficult for a lot of people, whether it be, dating apps or friend online apps. Everybody seems to struggle more and more, especially as, if you talk about younger people, with in-person conversation, with in-person community. And, one of the biggest startups of the past couple of years, I'm not exactly sure when it was founded, but was ClassPass, which is such a big thing for young post-college students to try to find community. And I think people are really desperate for community. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and how I can potentially pull off something of that nature when this is over. But in reality, this will never be over. This is just how it is now. And it's a shame, because I think we certainly need that idea of an event community space more than ever, but now it's more difficult than ever. So that's something I've been thinking
about. Wow. It seems like you kind of knew this was coming, because you burned through your 20 ideas for 2020 that you were doing by March, right? I feel like you wrapped that up right when you started COVID chats. It seemed like you kind of had some foresight here.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm clairvoyant, but certainly the 20 ideas for 2020, that was it was something I wanted to get out, something I wanted to get out to the public as we moved into a new decade. I mean, there was definitely uncertainty going on back then, despite the fabulous bull market and the great economy and whatnot. There's a lot of new disruptive technology and things like that. I mean, somebody else who certainly seemed ahead of the curve that everybody's thinking about now is Andrew Yang, right? I mean, he was talking about automation. He was talking about UBI. I mean, these are things that are happening now. Everything's been rapidly accelerated on that front. So, I tip my cap to him more than I tip my cap to myself on that one.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have kind of a beautiful, neatly way to package it the way that you did. But just how resilient our community is, whether it's my kind of personal community of friends, my family, the school community that I feel privileged to be a part of. Everyone who I'm interacting with is staying positive, just kind of stepping up and trying to volunteer here, volunteer there, figure out where they can be an added layer of support for someone who needs it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true test of resiliency. These moments, this moment in history. Another sort of non-educational question, just as to you. I mean, I see some pictures of your beautiful son there in the background. I know you mentioned he's a little older now, but something I'm concerned about, especially for young children, and concerned about it for myself too, although I have a little bit more of a developed immune system. But with all this sanitation and with all this prevention in terms of getting sick and sanitizing and whatnot, I'm very concerned about young children and their ability to develop a good base of immunity and just a good base of antibodies. Part of being a kid is getting dirty, getting the scrapes, getting a little sick so that you're prepared for it when you're older. What have you been doing on that front? Is there anything that you really can do?
Yeah, it's a good question. We feel super lucky that we had our son this past September, and we have him at home now in terms of like entertainment for us, and also just the extra time that we get with him,
Right.
of being home more. He's kind of a good age. He's 8 months right now, where you can kind of just like put like a squishy toy in front of him and he'll entertain himself. But he still gives you that feedback of like smiling and babbling. So we don't need to like plan like elaborate activities, which has been pretty great. But yeah, I mean, we were hoping to send him to daycare in the fall, and we're not sure if that's going to be a reality. Socially, if this keeps going on, how this will affect his, ability to socialize, in addition to kind of what you flagged in terms of immune system. I think this is just another area where right now we feel pretty privileged that he is the age he is. I can't imagine for, a first or second grader, the trauma that could linger from this experience of being at home. And so we're just grateful, for what we have in the circumstance we're in, and trying to all the time be mindful of that, despite the occasional thing here or there that we feel like we're missing out of. Because in the scheme of things, we feel pretty fortunate.
Yeah, we gotta be grateful for what we have, and people use the word privilege as such a pain point, such a bad thing to point out, but I think it can be flipped. We gotta work with the privilege that we do have and embrace it to a certain extent. Like I'm not gonna chastise my parents for raising me in New York. Like how dare you, mom and dad? It's like, no, I mean, listen, I was lucky, but it's a beautiful thing, and I gotta be grateful for it, right? So last thing here, a meatball for you. What are I saw this listened to it on another podcast, but what are a few things that you can't wait to do again?
It's a good question. Was hoping to see Fish this summer a little bit. They just canceled their whole tour. They moved it to 2021. So I'm looking forward to going to a show. I'm looking forward to taking the little guy to a show. I think if we went to an outdoor concert, my wife would allow for him to go, and kind of if we stood in like a far off corner. I think indoor venues are off limits until he becomes of age. But just looking forward to being outside with friends, going to the beach, doing things of that nature.
Getting out there.
But speaking of doing things over the summer, let's talk about camp for a second. Given that camp's where I brought you up from a young pup to who you are today.
Right.
What do you think should happen to summer camps?
Yeah, I saw the camp in Wisconsin, Osrui. They canceled all of their summer plans. Camp's not going to happen, from what I understand. I'm torn. I mean, at the beginning of this pandemic, something that was pointed out was that many children don't get the virus, or are asymptomatic. Of course, there's many adults at camp too. It's not just the kids. I think, and this is a little bit of a controversial point, and one that comes from a little bit of the privilege of not having the virus, and not knowing anybody who's died from the virus. I do know some people who have got it and recovered, but I think we have to maintain the systems that we have and what we have in place. I mean, I fear, just if we continue with this rigorous social distancing and this great fear of the virus, we will collapse as a society. I don't think this can really be maintained at the level. I don't want anybody to needlessly die, of course not. But I mean, not only is camp, a fun place, but it's an important place. Some of my best friends were made in camp. Part of why I'm talking to you is I met you and we connected in camp. So I think camp should happen this summer, perhaps in a reduced capacity, with thoughts of more sanitation and keeping things clean as best as possible. But I mean, you're not going to be able to do social distancing. Part of at camp is being close, and I think that just has to it has to happen. We really do need this for the kids. We need this for our own sake and for the institutions that we've created that we love. Maybe it will rely on more testing and just a more abundance of tests, so that if somebody was feeling a little iffy, they could get the test. They could be quarantined in the MARP or something. Stacy could take care of them. But yeah, no, I mean, I want to see camp happen for those kids. It would be a real shame if they weren't able to go back to camp until next summer.
Well said.
Thank you. Well, Josh, great to have you on the program. Really appreciate all the insight and you sharing the perspective with me.
Of course, Ruben. Anytime. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Best of luck with everything. I'm very grateful you're doing the work you're doing. Certainly the kids need it. Certainly you need it for your own sanity. I don't think it's selfish at all. Going in and getting out of the house, we really do need it. I'm going to go for a bike ride right now. It's a beautiful day in New York. Gotta get some vitamin D, right?
Definitely. I have some vitamin D drops that we've been giving Aaron.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
Yeah.
That's smart. Yeah.
I think it's something that like all kids get. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely, I've been taking vitamin C, airborne every now and then to try to boost the immune system. But certainly, yeah, vitamin D, the sun. I mean, there's so many essential things we're missing out on. But
yeah,
we'll leave it there. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. Stay healthy and we'll stay in touch.
Sure thing.